Right, so thank you very much for coming. So today we're going to talk about how to reduce your electricity bill to zero. And it's a little bit of a clickbait title, but I was reading one of the secret, semi-secret Octopus Energy forums, and there's guys on there, they're making thousands a year and getting free electricity. So, it seems to me that trying to get your electricity bill to zero is a fairly, easy target. People are doing far more than I'm attempting to do. Okay. Okay. Where are we? So, don't care about that. So, this is what I thought we could talk about today. And as I was saying before we started recording, I'm hoping that the slides will tease out some useful discussions at the end. So, this is what I thought I'd do is talk about the objectives, what I'm trying to do at home, go through what I have, which is all based on home automation and these other systems like, solars and batteries plugged in to home automation. I'm specifically going to focus on the rules that I've configured in Home Assistant to get my electricity down and also my carbon footprint down. And we'll talk about the results I've got. We can talk about a demo. I actually might move that demo to the end and then a bit of a summary. So as I say, stick your hand up at any time. We don't have that many slides, so we can take it fairly easy through the talk today. So these are my personal objectives, what I've been doing. So reduce the electricity bill as much as zero, hopefully get to zero or better, but, that's the goal. But also, and this is a key point, also reduce my carbon footprint. When you're consuming electricity and gas, you're ramping up your carbon footprint. So if you can reduce that, then that's going to help your overall yearly household footprint. But also, what I want to do, is just use household appliances when you want to. If you want to do the dishes, you stick the dishwasher on. If you want to do the washing, stick the washing machine on with no special timings or think about it. Just want the house to work as a house. I don't want a divorce, in other words. That's what that means. And obviously, the focus here is on Home Assistant, on home automation. So want to automate these, using solar and batteries as much as possible. And in particular, if things do go wrong, I want a message sent to me that something's gone wrong and it needs looking at. You don't really want to sit every day looking at your Home Assistant screen and you're looking at the graphs and stuff. You want to get on with your daily tasks and just get poked in the side if there's something that needs looking at. Now, as much should say, though, home automation isn't strictly essential to reduce your energy bill. However, it does make it somewhat easier and, you can do it without thinking so much. I've tried to standardize on any prices I mentioned. So I do include VAT, I do include standing charges. So it's the total costs that come out of my bank account, in other words. Now it includes car charging. So I've got an electric car. So in other words, when you look at these numbers, I've got no petrol, no diesel to add on to it. This is my, includes my transport bill, if you like. And it also includes hot water. So during the summer, I no longer use gas to heat hot water. I just use electricity. So that was my objectives. So this is what I've got in my house. So I've got a smart meter, obviously, and that's the electricity meter you can see there. And I do have a smart gas meter as well, and they're all hooked up. But today's talk is a bit of a focus on electricity. And my supplier is Octopus Energy. And I'm going to mention Octopus quite a few times. And I'll come to towards the end about alternatives to Octopus. So don't feel that the talk today you have to be an Octopus customer. That's not true. But you do want to find an energy supplier that gives you the tariffs that you need to work with you to reduce your cost and your footprint. You'll notice here, let's put my little laser pointer on. Notice here, I've got this little box here. This is I think it's called an Octopus Smart Hub, or Mini Hub, sorry. And what that does, it's a free thing from Octopus, and that talks to the smart meters and gives you real-time data to your smart meter. Normally, when you read your smart meter, it's read every half an hour, and then the smart meter network only gives you those values that it's read, usually the next day. So this little box here is sort of like broadly equivalent to the little in-house display that you get, showing your consumption in real time. But this allows you to read it in home automation and on your phone instead of using a little in-home display. And in fact, I was just reading yesterday, Octopus are trialing what they call a Home Hub Pro. So they're going further down this route to enable you to read your data in real time. And that's really important if you're trying to automate stuff. You really need to get your data in sort of like near real time so you can change or automate tasks depending on your usage. So what else have I got? I've got solar. And you can see oh, go on then, Ray. Feel free to interrupt me.
Yeah, just a quick query. That pink mini hub thing or whatever, do you have to be on a special tariff to get that?
No, if you're on Octopus, there's a form on the website. You can fill it in and then it will arrive in the post.
Right, thank you.
And P has also got your hand up.
Sorry, that's Paul. I haven't got time to reconfigure it yet. This Octopus thing, where does it get its power from? And do you need any special permission to connect it to the smart meter? Because I've got an old SMET 1, which is useless, and they won't replace it for another 9 months as a queue. And it only updates with EDF about, as you say, once every half hour. But I want something that I can just clip onto the meter without having to go through any regulations. It will give me this real-time update. Now, the last house I had, until it stopped working, British Gas had supplied a little induction coil that blipped around the live wire and simply through a battery system, as a battery in each device, transmitted that through in real time to a device in the house. And that's all it was doing. It was measuring the current going through the live wire. And that seemed very simple, but I can't seem to get a replacement for it.
Yeah, so I'll answer that. So you can see in that picture, I've got Harvey. And this is the solution, as you mentioned, secondly, for My Energy. So this Harvey just clips on the wire, as you can see here, and it transmits it to the My Energy hub. So that's the kind of one option you have for doing it yourself. But going back to the Home Mini, you can see here it's powered by USB. And, if you scroll up here, it's just plugged in. But it talks directly to your smart meters via Zigbee. Obviously, Octopus Energy have got all the right encryption keys in there. And this is actually a SMETS 1 meter from Secure. So I'm actually using the Home Mini with SMETS 1 at the moment. That's what I've got. So definitely worth a shot, I would say. And you go through the handheld app to set it up and get it connected to your smart meters.
Yeah, I've got an outdoor meter, Peter, so there's no USB at that point. But
it just needs to be in range, right? So just put it inside and plug it into a main socket somewhere.
Yeah, okay, right. Yeah, I guess the other way is to get a battery one, isn't it? And you just use the rechargeable battery and replace it every 3 months or something like that.
Zigbee is quite a long distance protocol. It goes through a couple of rooms, I'd imagine.
Okay, just one further thing. Is Zigbee going over is it very similar to Bluetooth and going over the similar frequencies?
I've not dug into it. It's a wireless protocol.
Right.
Okay, some sort of frequency, but it's encrypted.
Yeah, okay. The reason I ask is I do have one of these things on the central heating, and I think that's Zigbee, but it occasionally gets interfered with or jammed and it falls out. It's a Hive.
Oh,
and I
right.
don't have the hub. The previous owner didn't leave that,
No.
and occasionally the connection to the boiler drops out, and then I've got to go through a torturous reset process each
Well,
time.
I've had this.
But apparently that's on Zigbee, but I need to look at how the Zigbee protocol works.
Yeah.
I assume it's similar to an encrypted Bluetooth, and it's proprietary, isn't it?
I mean, I've had it there for maybe a year now, and I've not had any issues with it. It's just sat in the garage, and it's just been spewing out data to me.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Peter.
David.
Oh, right, I'm off mute. Yeah, they both use the same frequency, so it's related to the last question. They're both on 2.4 gigahertz, but then half the stuff that uses radio is on 2.4 gigahertz, and your microwave operates on 2.4 gigahertz as well. So there's ample opportunity for interference.
Exactly, and I presume the car keys do too, because I'm having those jam from time to time.
They might be on 800 or 413. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So
without a spectrum analyzer, it's difficult to work out whether it's deliberate jamming or whether it's interference caused by machinery that's not working properly and things like that.
Yeah. Peter was referring to the hub. So, there we go.
Yeah, microwave. Okay, I'll watch the microwave next time. Thanks. I'll try and coordinate that.
So that's the Home Mini. So it's very thin. That's the front of it. So it's like he's got on the wall, but it's less than it's about a centimetre thick. The thing is, to get it, you have to join a queue. So if you think you want one, I would join the queue, and they send it off to you, and it's free. And because it's connecting to your smart meter, there's no other interaction that you have to apply for.
Thanks, David. Okay, so carrying on with what I've got. So I've got solar, and I think I've mentioned this before to this group, but I'll mention it again. I mean, the reason I've not had solar for years is because I knew my roof needed to be repaired. So last summer, we forked out to replace the roof, and if you replace the roof, you may as well stick solar there. And if you stick solar, you may as well put a battery in, and so on. So the bill escalates as soon as you want to repair your roof. But I've got a single solution for battery. So this is a hybrid battery stroke inverter in one box from My Energy. And I've also got an electric car and again, My Energy charger. So, I mean, there's no reason from a home automation that you need to buy everything from the same company. I ended up with it from the same company. Also, I've got this little device here. I've got a reference to it at the end, which is a 240 volt, 3 kilowatt switch over Wi-Fi, but it's also got a built-in thermometer. So I'm using that to control the immersion heater in my water tank. And of course, I'm bringing all these bits and pieces together via Home Assistant. Home Assistant's automation. So with Home Assistants, we're doing a few different things. We're monitoring everything. So I'm monitoring all the real-time data coming from Octopus. I'm monitoring all the data coming from solar and from a battery and car charging and so on. But I'm also using Home Assistant to control the smart features. So we certainly got smart features on our battery. You can enable it to charge or discharge or turn off and such like. And also, of course, you can control the smart meters of your car charging. So it's a two-way process. We're doing monitoring and controlling. And Octopus is probably an unusual power company because it's got a lot of smart features in it. And we'll talk about that later. So yes, Home Assistant is sending messages to Octopus Energy to do various things. We'll talk about that. So that's roughly what I've got in the house. So the goal is this is what I've got. I want to get to a zero bill, lower carbon footprint. How do we do it? So now before we launch into the details, Pamela stroke Steve has got your hand up.
Oh, hello. Sorry about another video. It's not working. Yes, I was just wondering about the electric vehicle. What is the petrol equivalent of the carbon footprint of the battery? I mean, how many miles do you have to cover?
Actually, I return. There was a discussion on Nextdoor this morning, so I looked it up, and it's 13,500 miles, and a typical electric car regains a carbon footprint difference between an electric car and a petrol car.
Oh,
13,500 miles.
I see. Oh, right, because there's a lot of it. I'd heard it was 50,000
No.
miles, but that's gone down a lot. But
Yeah, I mean, electric cars are much simpler, of course. They consist of a battery and a motor, basically. So, most of the carbon filtering.
I don't know why they're so expensive because it's
Well, they're
hardly.
coming down in price, actually. And of course, I don't want to get into this too much in today's talk, but on my with these tariffs I'm just about to talk about is it costs me, less than 2 pence a mile compared with what 20 pence or so with petrol. So, I've saved a fortune after buying my electric
Oh,
car.
yeah, yes, you are at the moment because you're not there's no fuel tax at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they're gonna, but anyway.
Well, they brought in road tax, haven't they, for EVs this year?
Yeah, the vehicle excise duty.
190, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't pay any of it now.
You don't pay for an EV. Well, you do this year. You come
Yeah,
in.
I mean, again, this is beyond the scope of today's talk, but the government at the moment is taxing based on emissions, really. So if you've got a car which is, putting out, tons of particulates and CO2 and stuff, then you're going to be taxed a lot for that, both in terms of fuel and
Yes, but the batteries, the emissions are in China, aren't they? So,
No, they're coming out the back of your exhaust pipe.
all right, okay, thanks for that.
Paul, you got your hand up.
Yeah, hi. Can I just ask about the hub there, the Home Sense or the Home Hub? They got things like Apple's got a Home Hub, Google's got a thingy. Are they running an independent network over your router through as a virtual network, or are they talking to the supplier as well? And I'm thinking really of what am I going to be putting on my network and how can I isolate it from everything else that's on it?
Yeah, good point, Paul. So this is Home Assistant. It's an open source solution. You can download it and install it on, pretty much any hardware. I've got a little Odroid device here, but you can use the Raspberry Pi. Many devices that you buy support what's called the local mode. So in other words, Home Assistant will just talk over your Wi-Fi network or your Ethernet network and talk to devices directly. So Home Assistant here, I talk directly to the hot water heater over Wi-Fi, so that doesn't go outside of my home network. However, sometimes, of course, you do need to talk to cloud servers, and yes, I do need to talk to Octopus to their server over the internet to read my power meter, which is a bit annoying.
That was one of the concerns I had, because effectively it's this pattern of life thing and whether you're in or out of the home for extended periods. And I don't know what you can do about that. If you've got a smart meter, you're sort of snookered anyway at that point, aren't you?
Well, no. I was just chatting earlier. Octopus are producing they're beta testing it now, a Home Hub Pro, and that enables you to make a local connection to it and read your data without going through the internet.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
So these things are improving.
At some point it's on the power company's server because they've got to be able to bill you. The question is what granularity they actually store, which is or what's available real time from their server end from their internal point of view. That's the issue, and I don't think there's much I can do about that. Lock the front door and turn the alarms on and things. But thanks, that's helpful. And I'm going to be interested in your next bit about the tariffs.
Malcolm.
Comment on the Wi-Fi. Some of these devices are less than secure, so general good practice is to set up a guest Wi-Fi or a specific Wi-Fi for IoT devices, and keep that separate from your own internal Wi-Fi for your laptops and the like.
Okay.
Yeah, I do use an internally firewalled guest network, but there comes a point where some of these devices will or will not let you do that, but because it's bridging across the two when you want the information. But there are ways around it, but it is an issue quite rightly to be aware of.
Thanks, Paul. If we can just stick to putting your hands up today, thank you. So energy tariffs overview. This is going to be a quick run through. So, again, don't think I'm focused on Octopus unfairly. I personally think they are the best for these smart tariffs, but more and more other energy companies are coming up with similar tariffs. So, you can go to your own energy provider and see what they've got. But the main point is what they're trying to do is to promote demand flexible pricing. It's a kind of industry term. And the goal is to better balance the grid. And what they really want to do is to move electricity you're consuming at peak rate and move it instead to consuming it off peak. And there's lots of good information from Octopus, and they talk about just from the one energy supplier, they can encourage their users to shift their usage such that, one or two gas power stations are simply not fired up that evening. So this really does matter and reduces the carbon footprint of the grid. To encourage you to shift your usage, they got lots of tariffs, of course. So the main tariff they offer, which everyone goes on by default, is called flexible, which is just a standard fixed rate one. They've got a tariff called Go for electric cars. And in there, they have very cheap overnight rates. And obviously, they want to encourage electric car owners, instead of charging at peak rate at 4 o'clock during the day, they want electric car owners to charge their car overnight. So if Octopus make it cheaper overnight, then more people are going to charge their car overnight. It's a standard business practice, I suppose. There's Intelligent Go, which is a bit more than Go, sort of like Go Plus, if you like. So they are even cheaper overnight. But this is an interesting one. Octopus decide when your car charging actually starts. Kind of an interesting one. I've got a picture of that in a minute. And both Go and Intelligent Go offer an alternative, which is outgoing add-on, if you like. So if you've got solar and you've got Intelligent Go, you can actually get paid quite a lot for any energy you export. Octopus have also got Cozy, which is designed for underfloor and heat pump users, and that has 2 cheap periods. And again, Octopus are trying to encourage underfloor and heat pump users to heat their house before breakfast, if you like, and again before dinner time, and avoid peak times. In fact, with this tariff plan, it's actually pretty expensive to turn on your heat pump at 4 or 5 p.m. So, and there's another one called Flux, which is designed for solar and battery users. It's cheapest import overnight, and it's got great export rates. There's Intelligent Flux, which is the same as Flux, but Octopus choose when your home battery is charged. And if you agree to do that, you get even cheaper electricity. And the last one I mentioned, because this is going to apply to everyone, even if you don't have electric car, you don't have solar, this still applies to you. And it's a tracker, which it tracks the wholesale value of electricity, and it varies each day. And finally, you've got the most complex tariff, which is Agile, which varies over the day. So in the morning, it might be 10 pence per unit. At 11 p.m., it might be 26 pence. At 3 p.m., it might be minus 10 pence, and so on. So that is a very variable tariff. And on top of that, Octopus have got a rewards program called OctaPlus. And what you can do specific behaviors. For example, if during the winter time, Octopus see it's going to be very high demand at 5 p.m., you might get an hour's notice or 2 hours notice And if you can switch your demand away from that 5 p.m. window, say instead of eating at 5 p.m., you eat at 6 p.m., then Octopus will actually pay you an awful lot of money to avoid consuming electricity during that window. And so, I mean, it's a lot actually. So normal electricity price is what, 27p per unit. Octopus will pay you £4.50 a unit if you agree to eat an hour later. Malcolm.
Yeah, just to comment on that. So you can actually, if you've got excess energy in your batteries, you can also dump it during that time as well.
You're getting ahead of my slides there.
And there are, officially you get an hour's notice, but there are various forums online where you can pick up normally around 10 in the morning if it's likely to happen. So there are various Facebook groups and there's actually a page on the National Grid website you can follow.
You don't need Facebook for this. You automate it.
No, but to get an indication whether it's coming or not, so you can pre-charge your batteries to dump them. Then can
you just hold that thought? We're going to get into that area. Paul.
Just a quick one. Do they guarantee if you go for any of these more intelligent tariffs that you'll always be, even if only slightly, cheaper than the standard variable rate for the actual number of kilowatt hours you use?
No.
Right. So you've got to be very careful what you choose then.
Yes, exactly. And that's what we want to automate, right? So just give me a few seconds. So what I've got is Intelligent Go. I've got fixed outgoing, and I'm obviously on the Octoplus. So I'm using Intelligent Go for input for buying electricity, fixed outgoing if I've got excess solar for selling electricity, and I'm on the rewards program. So what this means to me, gets us some numbers. Yeah. So sort of coming to some points that were made just now. I think this is currently the values for the standard rates for Octopus. 26.6 pence per kilowatt hour buy-in electricity. And you've got this enormous standard charge. Intelligent Go, 5 hours overnight is 7.5 pence. But the rest of the time, it's actually more expensive than the standard rate. And of course, you've got the standard charge. And outgoing, if I've got excess solar, I sell that at 15 pence. So some comments here is overnight, it's very cheap. During the day, it's very expensive. I really want to set up my automations to avoid buying any electricity at this rate. And this is a lot. So you'll notice that this is double the nightly import. So as we were talking just now, there's opportunity here to buy electricity at 7.5 pence per unit and sell it back at 15 pence. Bonkers, but this is what Octopus is trying to encourage behavior. This is all about being a better grid citizen, using your electricity when it's cheap, avoiding using electricity when it's expensive. Malcolm, you had another point to raise?
Oh, no, sorry, forgot to write down.
Okay. All right. So Octopus Intelligent Go. So this is a little bit fancy. So when you plug your car in for charging, Octopus decide when to charge. Bit of interesting. And they will choose the greenest and cheapest slots within the parameters that you've chosen. And so these slots can happen during the day, during the night, whatever. But when Octopus decide your car is good for charging, it might be lots of wind or lots of solar at one point, they'll start your car charging. When that starts, that cheap rate, you can power your whole house. So it's not only charging your car. So I plug my car in at 9 a.m. I set the parameters, please charge my car 100% by 5 a.m. tomorrow. And Octopus may decide there's excess wind at 11 a.m. We're going to start charging your car. At that point, at 11 a.m., my whole house is at the 7.5 pence per unit. And this is what it looks like on the app. So you plug your car in, it gives you a smart charging schedule, and you specify how much you want to charge and by when. And this is going to become, I think, the new way to interface with your energy supplier. You'll have apps to do various things. You might want to say, right, I want to, finish my dishwasher by, 4 p.m. And then your energy company will decide to send a message when that actually do it. They'll offer in return cheaper electricity. So play the game. You'll reduce your carbon footprint because you're consuming energy via wind and solar and such like, and also getting cheapest electricity. So, Steve, I think it is. You got your hand up.
Oh yes, you probably can't answer this question, but how do the standing charges compare? Because my standing charge is ridiculous.
Yeah,
I use hardly any electricity and gas.
Yeah, it's the standing charge is set by the industry. So I know Octopus say it's like 1% less than the industry value or something like that, but it's pretty much
what I was thinking of doing is don't use get a battery and charge it up overnight, and then use that to power all the lights and everything in the
exactly.
day.
Hold that thought. That's exactly what we should be doing. Hold that thought.
But the standing charge is going to clobber that, I think, don't they?
Yeah, hopefully a standing charge. There's lots of discussions going on about standing charges.
I don't want electricity in the day at all.
Exactly.
If I've got a
just
battery.
Hold that thought. We're going to come on to that. John, you got your hand up. Can't hear you, John. All right, we'll play on. Perhaps if you can unmute and ask your question later. Sorry, I can't hear you, so I'm just going to go on. Right, and the last thing I want to mention is Octo Plus. And it's like a loyalty scheme. Again, trying to change your behavior and give you a reward. And it just ends up with money off your bill. So you get these saving sessions over winter. So you get a notification from Octopus when a saving session is going to start. And if you choose to opt in, you have to opt in. And then during that given hour that you're set, if you can reduce your usage, then you get rewards, effectively money off your bill for your efforts. So yeah, defer corn. Interesting point about this saving session scheme is that it works two ways. If you don't have solar, you can use the time that you're allocated to reduce your typical usage, defer your cooking is a classic example. But if you've got solar, you can do the other thing is that during that 1 or 2 hour period, dump off your battery and you can get a lot of rewards. I say, it's like 450 a kilowatt hour. So that's quite big. Steve, you got your hand up again?
Oh no,
okay.
Probably haven't lowered it.
Okay. And they got little gimmicks like Wheel of Fortune, and if you've got a electric car, you can get notifications when the grid is greener and when it's not greener. So instead of charging your car on Tuesdays, if you can defer it to Wednesdays, then your carbon footprint will be less, and you get points for actually taking the effort on that. And other these schemes come and go. A little bit of a gimmick, but if you're willing to pay the game, it can be quite rewarding. And here's an example. So you get a notification on your app. The next saving session is tomorrow. So you've got a whole 24 hours notice between 5:30 and 6:30. So you have to opt in, and then during that period, either use less electricity or dump your battery to the grid to get the revenue for that. So with all this in mind, this is just the preamble stuff about tariff plans. I want to get back to automating all these sorts of things. So first thing I want to do is to monitor what my house is doing, what my energy consumption is, and then you can make some better decisions about, you know, how to tweak things or how to automate things. So this is my standard graph in Home Assistant. And with Home Assistant, you can make up graphs from all your data. But for the purpose of this talk, I'm going to focus on this graph and maybe one or two others. So this is actually a plot of time of day.
Peter, you're not screen sharing anymore.
I am still screen sharing.
I can see it. It
Okay.
seems fine to me.
Okay, thank you for that. So I assume it's something at your end. So this plot along the bottom is time of day. Along here, up here, I've got pence per kilowatt hour. And on this axis, I've got kilowatts. And this background shaded blue is my tariff plan. So Home Assistant has reached out to Octopus. It's downloaded my tariff plan for the day, and we're plotting it. So you can see, you know, overnight it's cheap at 7.5%, and during the day it's quite expensive. And of course, once we've got that as a background for our graph, we can add in other information. You know, we can add in solar. So we can see, you know, how much solar we're getting. We can add in the state of charge of the battery. We can add in importing electricity, both at peak rates and off-peak rates. And what I've done, actually, I've coloured in any electricity import in during peak times as red and electricity imports as green. And so from a, you know, looking at the screen point of view, my goal is to get rid of all the red and have everything green. So all my electricity then becomes at 7.5 pence per unit when I'm importing. And of course, we've got exporting. And this is the blue one. And this is when I'm selling excess electricity back to the grid. And we're going to keep coming back to this graph and highlight various things and look at how you can configure home automation to, you know, make best of what you're doing. And so it ends up as a pretty busy graph, and we're going to drill down into it. But, you know, I find it as a useful, at least one way to look at my house consumption. Nick?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you. If you, I've got solar panels and an EV. You talked about the fixed outgoing, 15 pence a kilowatt hour for exported power.
Yep.
Can you get that deal, that payment, if you're also receiving the feed-in tariff? Because we've had our solar panels for quite a while.
David might be able to better answer that because we're just chatting to that before we started. But I believe David has actually successfully managed to keep his feed-in tariff and move to the export.
Yeah,
David?
so the main so FITs, there are two parts to it. You get a payment for whatever you generate, and then you get a payment for what you export. And the export has a wrinkle in that if you don't have measured export, then you would have deemed export, where they estimate that you export half of what you generate. Okay, that's the way FITs work. And then the various tariffs, the payments for each of those then varied over time, depending on when you had your system installed. We had our system installed in 2017, so we're on the rubbish tariff. Basically, with Octopus, you can retain the generation tariff, the FITs generation, but you can't retain the FITs outgoing or the FITs export if you want to use one of their outgoing tariffs. So it's one or the other. Their outgoing tariff pays better than their SEG tariff. So SEG replaced FITs generally. So I'm in the process at the moment of retaining my generation fits and getting rid of my export fits and switching to Octopus outgoing. Now, which fixed it will be, I don't know. The one that Peter's got is the higher value one because he's got Intelligent Go. If you don't have Intelligent Go, you get a lower payment. But in my case, any of the payments for outgoing is more than I get from for the fits export.
Just an update on that, David. My next door neighbour has just signed up to Octopus. He doesn't have an electric car, and he is on 15 pence for export.
Oh, cool. So I may get 15p.
Yeah, so ask Octopus and see what happens. He's on it. I saw it on the app, and he doesn't have an electric car.
Right. I would say that you have to persist with their front desk. The front desk didn't believe you could do this, but there is an Octopus blog, and there is an entry on there, one of the facts for Octopus outgoing, that specifically states that you can do this. Right, and their front desk obviously hadn't read the facts. So anyway, so there was a bit of an argy-bargy, and they finally admitted I was right, and so hopefully we're now proceeding.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. So let's push on. So I'm just introducing one of the graphs in Home Assistant. I mean, we can go live a little bit later. So what I've done with Home Assistant is to break all this down into separate rules. What I'm trying to do is I've got Octopus tariffs. I've got a battery, I've got solar, I've got electric car, I've got hot water, and I want to control all these devices and manage them in the best way to get my electricity bill down as much as I can. And so I've actually numbered all the Home Assistant rules, and we'll look at them one by one. So this is rule 1. And this is a screenshot in Home Assistant. And this is what it looks like. So it's pretty accessible. You don't have to be a programmer to do this stuff. And so this is my rule 1A. And this is about starting my house battery charging from grid, obviously when the grid is cheap. So I get a signal from Octopus when the price goes from high to low. So when that goes from high to low, then I have a little debug message. I change my Libby operator mode. I set charge from grid, and I've also got a setting on my charger. So this is very typical for home automation. When something happens, rates have changed, then in this case, we are sending the right commands to my battery to start charging from grid. And I've got a 1B, which is the opposite. When we move from cheap to high, I want to stop charging my battery. I really don't want to charge my battery with expensive electricity. So I do the reverse. And so coming back to my plot here, what I've just talked about is when cheap rate starts, we actually start charging my battery up. And when cheap rate finishes, which is, over here really, then we stop charging the battery. So 2 little rules. Yes, my first case, charge your house battery when electricity is cheap. Nice and easy. Oh, ignore these other bits and pieces. We'll talk about those in a minute. So rule number 2 in Home Assistant, switch on my immersion heater. So I've got here a template trigger. And if there's interest, I can happy to dig into this. And this is a little bit of, rather than a explicit comparison, this is just a little bit of code if this is greater than that. I'll dig into it a little bit. So if it's time to switch on the immersion heater, then I call, switch on immersion heater. And likewise, when cheap rate ends, I turn off the immersion heater. Now, here's the thing about immersion heaters. So this is the graph, slightly different graph here. I've got the temperature of my water tank here. You can see here I've consumed some hot water. And this blue bit here is actually when I'm heating the water. And my goal here is to heat my hot water such that at the end of the cheap rate, it gets up to temperature. I don't want to heat the hot water too early because it's going to cool down during the night. So my cheap rate ends at 5:30, and at 5:30 a.m. I want my hot water tank up to temperature, ready to use. I don't want it to be up to temperature before 5:30 or not. And it turns out it's not trivial to do this rule, because the start point when you turn on the immersion heater is a variable time. It's not 5 a.m. It's not 4:30 a.m. It actually depends on the current temperature of your tank and how fast your element inside your tank works. So in other words, you can heat your tank. I think mine is something like 1 degree for 15 minutes or something like that. So you need to correlate the temperature of your water tank with time of day to hit that magic spot here. So you start heating your water tank so that it gets to your target temperature exactly when your cheap rate finishes. So there's a little bit complicated rules, and if anyone's interested in how I figure that out, I can go into that. Not a problem. Yes, so I'm doing choosing those 2 points with those rules. And it turns out, by the way, I've done the sums on this. Heating hot water via cheap rate electricity is cheaper, both cheaper and greener than heating hot water with gas. In my case, your case might be different. All right, Home Assistant Rule 3. Export your battery before cheap rate. And we sort of touched on this, and I didn't want to talk about it too early. So if you've got a sunny day, during the day, you've got lots of solar, your battery's at 100%, you're exporting excess. By the time you come to the cheap rate, you might have, 60% of your battery left. So there's no point doing nothing with that, because you can get paid 15 pence per unit to export, but it only takes 7.5% to fill it up again. So again, we've got this little template trigger. When that happens, we export our battery to the grid. And this is what we're trying to do. Coming back to our graph here, what we're trying to do is this point here. So the black line here is our battery state of charge. So we hover around 100% as we got solar and so on. When the sun goes down, the battery then is discharging as it powers the house, goes down again. And if, in this case, what we're down to like 50%, you may as well dump that back to the grid. So your battery gets close to zero just as the cheap rate starts. And then during cheap rate, you can charge your battery up again. So this discharge here, this export electricity is earning you 15 pence a unit. This recharge is only costing you 7.5 pence. David.
Yeah, just a quickie. You may be covering it a bit later. Do you have any views on the impact on the battery lifetime?
Yes, I've got a note on that.
Okay, I'll let you.
I'll defer that. Yeah, very good point. Actually, I was thinking of you when I put it in the slides. Moving on to Rule 4. So this is a cheeky one, right? So during cheap rate overnight, you think about this for a minute, you can either just charge your battery to full during cheap rate, but if your cheap rate is big enough, you can sneak in a discharge and recharge cycle. So that's exactly what I'm doing. So during the cheap rate, I'm going to dump my battery out to the grid, which earns me 15 pence a unit, and then I'm going to charge it back up again, which costs me 7.5 pence per unit. And again, we've got the rule here, 120 minutes into cheap rate, we're going to start exporting. and 190 minutes during cheap rate, we charge again. So this is this weird graph here overnight. So we start off, cheap rate starts, our battery is now discharged because any charge from solar, we may as well sell it back. We've charged our battery up. We've done a discharge cycle and a recharge cycle. And we'll talk about those cycles if you want. So that earns you a bit of money. It's not a huge amount each day, but over 365 days a year, this is a significant input to reducing your yearly electricity bill. And, if you automate it, it just happens every day, automatically, overnight, without thinking about it. Okay, on to rule 5. So Ray.
Yeah, do you actually practice the 20% lowest charge to the 80% full charge rule, or do you go from 0 to 100% on the battery?
Good question. I will probably touch on this later, but I'm ignoring that rule. And I generally ignore that rule for my electric car as well. And, you can take a different opinion, obviously, and automate it in whichever way you want. But it seems to me that modern batteries, the last 2 or 3 years, this kind of effect of 20, 80% is at least less important than it was like 5, 10 years ago. Paul?
Does your system and also Octopus know your battery capacity and also its discharge rate and its maximum charge rate? Does that get coded in right at the start?
Octopus aren't aware particularly of my battery, so it's my home automation at home that's doing this charge and discharge cycle. And you can probably see on this graph here, oh no, this doesn't have to actually draw it in here. But yeah, the import rate and export rate is slightly different on my setup, but Octopus have got no clue about it really. They only know about my car.
Okay, I just thought that would be useful to them, because you can have lots of people with small capacity or small throughput systems and 1 or 2 with large throughput systems, but I guess that's going to come in the future, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe that's what they're using with the intelligent flux, which I'm not on, and that's where Octopus takes control of this discharge cycle. In my personal case, I'm not on that tariff, so my home automation is doing the battery charging and discharging. So we got this gimmicky join save. So when you get this message from Octopus saying there's going to be a saving session at 5 p.m, you have to opt in. You have to go on the app and press a button, but you can automate that. Home Assistant rule, when Octopus tells you that a new saving session exists, which is actually usually before it gets on Facebook or a notification in the app, you can read this by the Octopus API. So your home automation can look for that when it happens and join the session. So I always join the session regardless whether I can make use of it or not. And then we've got further rules here, which is not yet complete. So there's an option to charge your battery before the saving session starts. And during the saving session, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m, whatever, dump your battery out, and that should earn you about £4.5 per unit. So if you can export within the hour, maybe 3 kilowatt hours, what you're going to get at least £12 back for doing that. Steve. Can't hear you, Steve, if you wanted to say anything. Okay, I'll move on. These are still pending rules in my Home Assistant instance. I've got a whole bunch of other rules. I've got a pond pump in my garden, and I've decided to only run that overnight when the electricity is cheap. I've got batteries in my garage on charge, lawnmowers and such like, and I've chosen to only charge them when electricity is cheap. These things don't make much difference, but hey, I like playing with these things. An interesting one here is sometimes we end up using all our hot water early in the day from the immersion tank, and you don't really want to heat it with expensive electricity. So I've got an additional rule here is boost the immersion when it's sunny, in other words, powered by solar, battery is fully charged and water temperature is low. So, if your hot water has got to 20 degrees Celsius during the day, you've got lots of excess solar, well, you may choose to heat up your, someone's drawing on my head. So you might want to choose to, heat up your electricity rather than exporting your solar. I've got various notifications, including when my points are updated, auto converting points to my balance, my electricity balance. Why wouldn't you do that? Notification on charging status, notify when things go wrong. That's quite important. So if you plug your car in for charging, you really want it to be charged. So you really want to have some plan Bs, for example, in case your internet connection goes down and Octopus can't send the signals or something. And of course, I'm measuring daily, weekly, monthly totals, have nice pretty graphs. Here's a nice little one. I've got in Home Assistant a calendar. And in there, I put in when we are away from the house for holiday, and that automatically disables rules. There's no point me heating hot water when we're not going to use it because we're on a beach somewhere in Rhodes. So, what I'm finding is that once you've made the mental switch to home automation, you end up tweaking things and improving things, and each little tweak, gets your electricity price down a little, reduces your carbon footprint a little bit. So here's some conclusions. This is what I've got. Okay, so Octopus actually give you quite informative bills. And this is just one snapshot. They don't do it paper, this is PDF, they email to you. And this is a format of Octopus bills. So this is a particular day. In red here, they've drawn the pence per kilowatt hour, and you can see my usage. And so I'm not doing too badly here. So I'm using all my usage during peak rate, and there's a little tiny bit of peak electricity used, but it actually is pretty low. So in this particular day, my off-peak consumption at cheap rate is just over £1, and I'm using like 5p peak consumption. The problem is things like inverters aren't perfect. So if you switch your kettle on, the battery may not respond to that signal of your kettle being on instantly. It might take a few seconds. And so during those first few seconds, you're going to import electricity at full price before the battery managed to get up to speed. So there's a little bit of delay, and you end up consuming little tiny amounts of peak electricity. Not a lot you can do about that, I suppose. Here's another one. So this is a sample from my bill where I've plugged in the car. Octopus has granted me these slots to charge my car up. Octopus are sending the signals to my car to charge, but I'm automating this. I want to make use of those cheap periods as well. So if my battery is looking low, and perhaps during this period here, Octopus has reduced the price here, I want to make use of that. And I'm going to charge my battery at the same time. So home automation allows you to, play the game a bit more. And here's some summaries, if you like. So this is import, and you can see in this particular bill, my average pence per unit is 7.3 pence, and including VAT and standing charge, this particular month was £63.97, and my export during that time at 15 pence per unit, no VAT, so that's earned me 77 pence. So here I'm, whatever it is, 20 odd pounds in profit. And, you know, so you've got to think about this. This is, I'm earning money as well as powering my house, as well as powering my car, as well as heating my hot water during the summer. So it's pretty good. And in terms of pounds, so roughly, I mean, some rough numbers here. So my house consumes about 5,000 kilowatt hours per year. It includes hot water and charging. At a flexible rate, the standard tariff plan, that would have been about £1,500 a year. My solar generates roughly, 4,000 kilowatt hours per year. Some consumed and some exported. Grid imports, mostly at cheap rate, obviously, because we've automated that. And we make money during the summer, not summer, and we have to pay during the winter time. So the average over the year, without these saving sessions, I'm seeing about £185 cost. And if I add in the saving sessions, that should get me close to zero. So that's what I'm personally looking at, getting my electricity bill down to zero, including, hot water and a mileage on my car. The whole cost of my setup, when I repaired the roof and got solar, was about 12k. So payback time is about 8 years or so. That's what it's looking like. Or, if you've got this money in the bank earning interest, another way you can look at the payback period is what sort of percentage interest that would give you. And it's roughly equivalent to about 12.5% interest. So I personally, I prefer that rather than payback time. And this is what it's looking like. So this is exporting Home Assistant into Excel in this case, or not Excel, Google Sheets, sorry. So this period here is before I had solar installed. And you can see I've got an average here of, well, £100 a month or so. This period here is my transition period. So this is a period when I had solar plugged in, but I'm still waiting for the wretched paperwork to come through to actually earn money from that. And then now all that paperwork has come through and, I'm down to zero or better. So this blue is import, how much I'm buying electricity for. The black is standing charge. The black is standing charge. So above this graph is what I'm paying, and the green below it is how much I'm getting back from my exports. So hopefully during the summer, this green is bigger than and this is what I've sort of predicted over the whole period. So during the summer, I should be making money each month because I'm earning enough from my solar and doing this automation to make the best of what I've got. During the winter, it's not so sunny, so it's actually going to cost me a bit, but the average over the year should be, close to zero or better than zero. These little bumps here, okay, before you ask, is an indication of saving sessions are kicking in. They kick in only during winter time. So this is my kind of summary, I suppose, for the financial summary. John, got your hand up.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, having to use my phone and my tablet. One question about Intelligent. We've had it for quite a while, and we tend to get at least 4 hours every morning. And I'm just curious if that's because I live in Hornsey, the home to the world's largest offshore wind generation system, and there's plenty of spare electric that they can't get spread around the grid, or if you're seeing the same thing.
Because I get paid to export, I've actually got no interest in charging my car during the day. So I always plug my car in the evening. And so when the sun goes down, I want to charge my car when it's dark rather than it's light. I suppose that's what it boils down to. So I've not particularly observed that. I know Peter Weston has seen similar effects though. So I think it's pretty normal. You know, if you look at the greenness of the grid over a 24-hour period, it's green overnight, but you know, not so green at like 4 or 5 p.m. So, you know, Octopus are doing whatever they see fit to charge your car within your parameters whenever it's greenest for you.
I don't think you quite understood my question. We go out at 7 in the morning, unplug our car for 10 seconds, plug it back in, and they almost always give me a plan from 8 a.m. till 12 p.m. It's a very rare day they don't. And then some time in the afternoons, etc.
Yeah.
A half hour here, a half hour there. But I'm curious, do you see that a similar pattern where they're giving you cheap electric for 4 hours virtually every morning?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was trying to reply to that. So a couple of things is I'm personally not interested in that because it's more valuable to me to export my solar during the day rather than charge my car. You can't export and import at the same time with electricity. So, you know, if you don't have solar, that's absolutely the cheapest way to do it. But I will give you a warning on this. That is specifically against Octopus's terms and conditions. They call it gaming intelligent go. And so they may well spot that and stop you doing it.
Well, we also have a heat pump, so it's the time for me to do my hot water. And I mean, in the summer, in the winter, I boost my from about 10 to 12. I'll boost my heating up when it's cheap. And I mean, we've had in March when it was quite cold here. We heated our house, which is a 4-bedroom house, ran our car nearly 800 miles, heated our hot water for about 114 pounds.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, this home automation is all about automating all these sorts of things. You know, as you just said, your situation is different to mine. So if you add home automation, your rules will be different. So, you know, it would be better for you not to, you know, manually do these things, but actually automate it with something like Home Assistant. Sorry, John, I actually meant you earlier, John. Hi.
John Hay, yeah, hi.
Your name.
Thanks. I've got solar panels and a battery and a plug-in hybrid car. I'm interested to see, I mean, my panels are, I think, probably the same as yours, about 4 kilowatts of capacity. I believe yours is about that, isn't it? You mentioned 4,000 a year, which is about the same as mine. So is that right?
Yep.
And what's your battery capacity?
My battery is actually too small. I mean, I actually ordered it. I think it's 5.1 kilowatt hours. But when I think about it, my capacity, what I need my capacity for is in the evenings. And it's turning out, you know, a little bit more would be great, but 5.1 is not far off what I need.
Yeah,
you know,
mine's 3.
I think the recommendations, most people recommend 10 or so.
I mean, I would have gone for 10 if I'd known with hindsight, but and your electric car, how big is that? What is that?
64 kilowatt hours.
Yeah, so that's a full, as is only a plug-in hybrid at 15. I mean, I find that I'm surprised actually at your numbers, given that your car is all electric. But do these numbers reflect all your driving, or do you charge elsewhere?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I mean, from an insurance point of view, I always estimate my miles as 10,000 miles a year.
Right.
Probably do a little bit less than that in practice.
Yeah, I think the key thing that I need to do, I mean, I could get a bigger battery. With hindsight, I would say if anybody's looking to do a setup like this, 4 kilowatts of solar panels is probably the minimum you should have, ideally a bit more. But certainly the battery, you need to have a battery probably about 3 times. So if, let's say you've got 5 kilowatts of solar panels, which would be a good amount actually. Make sure you get something like certainly 12 to 15 kilowatt hour capacity battery. Anything smaller than that, and you're going to struggle to have enough. If you have a big one, then of course there's more opportunity for doing this importing and exporting business.
Oh, exactly. But bear in mind is the other constraint you've got there is the power output of your battery. So if you, for example, a saving sessions, if you can only export at 3 kilowatts, for example, there's only so much kilowatt hours you can export within 1 hour, So a bigger battery may not help for saving sessions. But, if you've got a 5-hour window overnight, even that, you're probably not going to, play around much beyond 5 or 6 kilowatt hour battery.
Just from a solar viewpoint, I mean, I charge even in the winter, I mean, I can still get pretty, unless it's really cloudy, quite a bit of charge. The battery's still even not big enough to charge up in the winter. So that's a basic thing. Just in terms of getting the best return on the investment for the panels.
Okay. Sorry, do you want to say something else? I'm just aware of the time, you see. I've got some slides left and I've got lots of people who want to have to say. What I will say, I hate cutting people off, but we do have the forum online, so we can move any kind of other discussions that we might have to the forum if we can. Paul?
Just do you have can you get do the solar panels get hot, and can you get ones now that have got pipes behind them for heating a small tank for the shower and things like that? And secondly, Peter, when you get to the end, there's quite a few questions on the chat as well.
Okay, I don't know, and yes, I'll read the chat before we get to the end.
I assume you don't have aircon either.
No, yeah, well, I've got a slide on that. Janet?
I was just going to ask how long you've been with Octopus and whether it was before you had the solar panels. And also, it looks as though it was about 8 months to set up the paperwork. Is that right?
Yeah, it was a bit less than that. It was like 6 months. It's an absolute nightmare. I end up writing to my MP and all sorts of things.
And were you with Octopus beforehand?
Yeah, I've been with Octopus for an awful long time. I've had an electric car for a long time. Of Octopus. Actually, I got an award from Octopus saying I was one of the original customers on Octopus Go. A little pack came through the post with a little.
And also quickly, does all this rely on having a mobile phone? Because I don't have a mobile phone.
It requires having does it require? I would say probably not strictly speaking, because you can access most of Octopus's stuff online. But Steve, if you can mute, please. I'll mute you. But you'll miss out on notifications. So when a saving session comes on, you really want to be notified. You need a bleep somewhere to tell you. I mean, you might be able to automate that. In fact, you can automate that. But one big reason I use mobile phones is because notifications from home automation I send over the Signal network. So, if I'm at home, that'll appear on my desktop. If I'm away from home, that'll appear on my mobile phone. So I'm always getting notified of major events from home automation.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, just a quick comment about using solar for hot water heating. I have a Eddy, Livy, My Energy Eddy, which you might be familiar with, all integrated in with the Livy and Zappi. It doesn't have a temperature measurement on it. It can have it as an option, but it means I've got to drill holes in my water tank. Be careful if you're just doing that though, because of the risk of Legionnaire's disease. So you need to go up to 60 degrees on a regular basis to kill off the bacteria. So I have I have an automation that checks, has it reached temperature, and if it hasn't reached temperature, then it actually triggers the hive hot water to heat it.
Yeah, good points. The eddy, I don't have an eddy, but the advantage over the eddy compared with what I'm doing is, of course, the eddy can put less load through the immersion heater. Whereas if you're just switching it on and off, you've either fully on or fully off, and the eddy does better than that. The Legionnaire's disease is kind of an interesting one because I did read up about it, and it's a combination, not only temperature, but of water flow. So if you're consuming the hot water tank every day, you can get away with a lower temperature. If you've got it stood there for a long time, you need that higher temperature. That's my understanding of the Legionnaires.
So as I say, I have an automation that checks, did it reach temperature within the last 2 days? And if it didn't, then it triggers the hive hot water just to bring up to temperature.
Excellent point. So I'm going to try and get through the rest of the slides quickly. So carbon footprint, that was my other goals. And of course, we do have the climate folks on the meeting today. So pre-solar, before I got solar, I was, as I say, the house was consuming about 5,000 kilowatt hours per year, which if you take the UK grid average, which I think is about 220 grams per CO2 per kilowatt hours. That means per year, my electricity carbon footprint is about 1.1 tons. That's prior to solar. Now, the solar 4000 solar saves about 0.9 tons. Shifting from peak to off peak. Now, here's an interesting thing. So on average, throughout 24 hours, the carbon footprint of UK grid is about 220 grams per kilowatt hour. Overnight, it's less because there's less demand, and so there's less gas-powered grid. And it's about 150 grams per kilowatt hour overnight. So if you can move your peak to off peak, you're actually reducing your carbon footprint, because you're not consuming electricity from a gas-powered power station. Avoiding gas to heat hot water is about 0.2 tons of carbon dioxide per year. Interesting thing, I would love to clarify these numbers, and maybe on the discussion forum, maybe people's gotten. But I think the solar manufacturing cost of my solar panels is about 1.4 tons of carbon. Battery manufacturing seems to be actually remarkably low, 0.3 tons. So there's a carbon footprint in building this stuff. So over 5 years, this is saving me roughly, 5 tons of CO2. And you've got to bear in mind that this is hot water, car mileage, and consuming devices on my home exactly the way I want to. I put the dishwasher on, I put the washing machine on, and so on. So I'm not changing behavior. So we are certainly seeing a reduction of CO2s, and I'm sure we can dispute and discuss these figures. And this is my carbon footprint estimate, similar sort of graph. And the prediction really is that during the summer, because I'm exporting solar, I'm actually carbon negative. I'm actually, gaining. But there is a carbon cost during the winter. And the average is I'm still getting a carbon footprint, but it's less than what it was. Demo, I'm going to finish the last couple of slides, I think, drop out of presentation mode, and then we can pick up any questions as we look at Home Assistant directly, if you like. So summary, some pros that I'm seeing. My average electricity bill should be, less than zero. And this is partly of solar. This is partly of tariff plans. This is partly gluing all these bits and pieces together by home automation. Smart tariffs encourage you to consume off-peak electricity because it's cheaper and greener. Even if you don't have these solars and cars and so on, obviously from the questions, some of us do, you can still buy into this thinking because you can use things like a tracker tariff plan. You can use saving sessions. But obviously, the more really, the more storage you've got at home, whether it be battery or hot water, the more you can consume off peak versus peak. Home automation, not strictly necessary, but it certainly helps to helps to do things automatically. Some concerns, some of these have already come up. You need to put some effort into getting this set up. You need to install home automation. You need to set up the rules so you charge a battery when it's cheap and export it when you get revenue and so on. But it's not too bad. You've seen some screenshots of the sorts of rules you can set up. Does require an internet connection, which may go down. So if your internet connection is unreliable, you won't be able to read your tariff plans from Octopus. This is a concern. As David mentioned, in particularly, doing this sort of stuff will increase the charge-discharge cycles on your battery, and you can make a judgment call if you think that's worth it or not. However, I will say my battery has got a 10-year unlimited cycle warranty, so that puts me in the mindset I'm not going to worry too much about these cycles. Now, here's one. If you look at the terms and conditions of Octopus and probably the other companies, there is what's called a brown export clause. And this means that you can't, or be against the terms and conditions, for example, to go out and buy a generator powered by diesel and export the electricity to the grid and earn 15 pence per unit. That is against the terms and conditions. And I suspect, I'm not going to write this down anywhere, but I suspect the idea of charging at 7.5% and then immediately discharging may also fall into this brown export clause of terms and conditions. That's why I put it in here. I'm ignoring it. You'll probably ignore it as well, but I thought I'd put that there. And as I found out this morning, Home Assistant has all sorts of plugins to talk to your devices. It's got a plugin for Octopus. It's got a plugin for My Energy. It's got a plugin for everything, your home, your radiators, and so on and so forth. And these plugins is open source. It's developed by different people, and you can easily find yourself in a position where you've made an update and it's broken something. So a little bit concerned, keeping up with, the changing environment of, new automations. There's a little bit of a pain here about, making sure things are still working. Big point I'd like to make here is I've been discussing what works for me. I'm using Octopus. You may not use an Octopus. Do your own research. You need to be measuring what your house is doing. You need to be looking at your tariff plans, figure out what you can do and what you can't do. And so I can see a couple of hands, but I'm going to finish off the slides before we break. Next steps for me personally, based on the results I've got so far, more automation such as saving sessions. Interesting thing is measuring the temperature in each room. I've noticed that my house has actually got a lot of passive heating from the sun. So you can imagine a home automation, which is something like for east-facing rooms, don't heat them up with gas in the morning because they're going to be heated by the sun pretty quickly. So you can play around with these sorts of things. Open window, so you open the window, shut off central heating for that room. Consider automating, washing, drying. I'd love to do more measurements, particularly cooker consumption. I've got no real handle on that. Big thing for me personally is to get rid of gas. I'm not using gas on the hob. I'm not using gas for hot water, but I am using gas over the winter for central heating. So I need to look at heat pumps, air to air, air to water, far infrared, maybe that's an alternative. Electric boiler, I'm thinking that might be the solution for me rather than heat pump. Electric boiler is vastly cheaper. It's hundreds of pounds rather than tens of thousands. It does consume more electricity than a heat pump, but the upfront cost is significantly less. And if you can figure out how to use your electric boiler off peak, I bet that might be a winner. I need to do my sums on that, so don't take me for granted. And I've just got an old-fashioned water tank with lots of lagging on it, and you can get smart water tanks now that cool down much slower. I need a better water tank. An interesting thing is the devices on my network that on my home power supply that consume the most. Number one is car charging. Number two is immersion heater, as you might expect from what we've already talked about it. Number three is fridge freezer. If you start measuring stuff, you might come to some surprising results. Our oven consumes less than our fridge freezer because our oven is on for a short amount of time, whereas a fridge freezer is on all day, every day. And some references. So I'm going to go from there. I'm going to go to, this is live, Home Assistant Live. And what I'll do, actually, I'll come with some questions and maybe I can answer them by doing this. So Bernie, you got a question?
Oh, hang on.
4 points. So I can't hear you.
How's that?
That's better.
Right. Just a quick question about Octopus Rewards, because I have been using it. I was a bit disappointed as to what we were getting from it. I'm wondering that the fact that we aren't earning much is that because we have solar panels, we've had them for a while, and Octopus, to run this scheme, have to estimate what your normal consumption has been in the past. Now,
have you got a house battery?
Yes.
So what you really need to do is, in the saving sessions, is instead of trying to reduce your usage, export your battery during the saving sessions instead.
Yes, I've picked that up today, and that's something which I think I will be looking at. I'm just trying to wonder, as I've had solar in the past, they've been looking at my previous usage, and it's obviously been very low because
yes.
So in fact, it's not really worth me going into the Octopus reward scheme because it pays so little.
Yeah, I refer you to the questions. If you've got solar, then you need to be exporting during saving sessions rather than reducing your consumption.
Yeah, I go along with that now. So thank you for that.
Okay. So this is Home Assistant. I don't know, what you want to see on this, but this is the graph that I showed you. This is in real time, which is a combined sort of graph. This is what I do. The other thing I do in Home Assistant is, as well as monitoring it like per day, I also do totals over daily, weekly, and monthly. So here, for example, I've got daily energy costs. So each day we can see how much solar I've got, how much grid off-peak, and how much export I've got each day. So I draw export negatively and import positively, and hopefully I can see just a tiny amount of peak each day. And of course I can convert that to costs. So here, so today so far you can see I spent 87 pence off peak, 61% on standing charge, and a little bit on peak, but I've exported £3.47. And it's kind of useful to plot those sorts of values weekly and particularly monthly. You can see, hopefully when I've got it running long enough, you can see these numbers, over summer and winter periods as well. And also I draw this thing full size because my eyes are starting to suffer. I mean, these graphs are quite nice. You can turn them off. You can play around with them a bit. The other useful thing I was going to mention is the energy graph on Home Assistant. And this is default graph. This you can't actually change this particular one. The one I showed you earlier, I've taken some effort into, you know, drawing the graphs up and so on. So this is a default display from Home Assistant, and you can see, you know, how much solar kilowatt hours, how much gas I've consumed, and what the battery's doing, and so forth. And this little graph shows you, you know, over time. I've got solar graph here. This here dotted line is today's prediction of solar, which is nice to compare the prediction with what we actually got. I think that's going to come useful as the solar panel ages. I mean, maybe I'll start to see solar generation, you know, a few percent below expectations, which might give me an indication that the panels are starting to degrade. Gas consumption, I don't use gas, but here we can see the totals. And today, this is a daily graph, we can see my import has cost £1.51. My export has earned £3.47. Gas standing charge 27p. So today so far I've earned £1.69. And you can do things like toggle these to monthly, or this month. So this is a monthly summary, or you can do it for yearly. So this is a summary yearly. So this is quite a nice graph in Home Assistant. I just wanted to show you that. And the last thing, unless before I come to questions or other comments, these are the automations that I talked about. Let's just look at one of them, and I'll just drill down in a little bit more detail. So this is, I just showed you the screenshots. And this is how you actually configure it, just in a form. When the time is equal to Octopus start of off-peak, then do a little debug. Switch my battery mode to normal. Switch the charge to turn it on. And turn my car charge into Eco Plus, just in case I've forgotten to change it. So all these sorts of rules work, you know, very, very easy, clicky, and, you know. Right, so Bernie, you've got your hand up again. You're muted still.
How do I get
That's it. We can hear you now.
There we go. Sorry.
Did you have a question? Okay. Neil.
Yeah, just a quickie. The code that's in there, is that generated by Home Assistant, or did you generate it?
These rules here, I created from scratch. You know, you just do, you know, create an automation, create a new automation. You add a trigger when something changes states. I don't know. Got all sorts of things you can trigger on. Let's do a search for saving sessions. Saving sessions goes from on to off, for example. And that's the way you program these things, you know. It's very clicky. You've got conditions, and then do some action. You might, you know, send a command to your battery, or send yourself a message to your phone or something. Any other questions? I'll read through the, got lots of comments in the window. Okay, my car is self-charge. So it's yeah, self-charging hybrid. Can't charge. Can't change gas chimes much, as that's hot water and heating. Well, of course, you can store hot water. So that's one thing. You can make use of off-peak electricity to heat your hot water. Obviously, gas, you don't tend to get off and on-peak gas periods. I could shower later and heat before peak to avoid peak, but apart from cooking times and washing, what other options to save? Well, you got your saving sessions. That's going to be a big thing, and say that can earn you up to £4.50 a unit. So that's quite a big thing. You can sign up to Octopus Intelligent, and I would encourage you to do so, because that will give you 5 hours off peak overnight, and you might choose to put your washing machine on, your dishwasher on overnight to get the price down, and you might choose to get a battery so you can store that electricity overnight, and of course do a little bit of your plug-in charging. Oh, it's self-charging. So yeah, so the more storage you've got, the better efficiency you can get in terms of saving money and carbon footprint. What are the typical home rectifiers and inverter efficiency these days? As far as I can see, they're around about 90–95% efficient. So there is that effect, but I'm seeing the benefits, the cost and carbon benefits far outweigh these efficiencies, these losses that you get. If you fit solar battery, does someone with a Part B electrical certificate have to do the connections? And is there a separate feed-in unit for the system? Yes, so if you've got solar, you have to have an export meter, one way or another, and you have to have a electrician to come and fit that and do the paperwork, and then eventually you get generated an export MPAN from the electricity company, which can be used to earn money from. So there's a bit of a paper trail to go through. Some people have gone through this cycle really quickly, once your electrician has done his part, but other people have found it's very tortuous. How does the feed-in actually work? When you're importing electricity, you're buying electricity from the grid. If you've got a battery and you're exporting, you put your battery in export mode, and then power flows out of your house into the grid. So actually, giving electricity to your neighbours and such. And both of those are measured. Both of those go to electricity company, and they'll display, how much you've earned from your export and how much you're paying for your input. And hopefully your export is more than your input. Are EV chargers key locked or coded? They certainly can be. Mine's got the feature for doing exactly that. I don't bother. I just live on a close. If someone uses my charger, I'm not away, I'm going to get a notification on my phone and I'm going to find out. But I take the view, if someone's going to use my car charger when I'm not around, they've probably got into a bit of a pickle and, discharged their car, and I would be, happy to help them out. If I find that my neighbour starts stealing my electricity regularly, then I'll enable the lock. So yes, they do have locks. For a typical 3–4 bedroom house, what's a good solar panel output and battery capacity that hits a sweet spot? So you've also got surface area on your roof, assuming you've got solar on your roof. So you saw the picture of my roof. That pretty much fills up 1/2 of my roof. And that was a peak 4.5 kilowatt hour system. I've actually got more than that. I've got up where of 5 kilowatts. So sorry, 4.5 kilowatt peak. I've actually seen close to 5 kilowatts when it's been very sunny. So you can probably double that, but there are contractual limitations with the grid. If you decide to plug in, 20 kilowatts generation to the grid, then you're going to have a hard time getting the paperwork through, because the grid and your local street will probably have something to say about that. And I think there's a export limit of 5 kilowatts, if I remember correctly, by default. Beyond that, you've got to go through a different system. And I've got a 5.1 kilowatt hour battery, which I think is a tiny bit small. So I think the sweet spot is probably around 7 kilowatt hours. I know most people just start a 10 kilowatt hour battery. Yeah, I got an answer there from David. Thank you. Hopefully what I've said is similar. How much time do you spend doing this, please? Good question. This is a computing forum, so I've actually spent a fair amount of effort on this. It takes probably about an afternoon to get started, and in terms of installing Home Assistant and connecting onto your network and installing most of your devices, setting these rules up. Maybe another day to tweak your rules. I spend most of my time with Home Assistant tweaking the pretty graphs, to be honest, because I'm never quite happy with the colors or the types of graphs or that sort of stuff. Battery and solar are useful for power cuts. That is definitely true, what Paul says. However, you have to have something called an island mode to enable that. So if you get a power cut, what you can't do is export your battery to the grid during a power cut, because you might electrocute some electricians working on the grid. And so if there's a power cut, you have to disconnect your house from the grid, called island mode, before enabling the battery power of your house. Can you only use power during a power cut if you've approved bridge? Yes, that is true. If you try to have your battery running and a power cut and you're exporting to the grid, someone's going to be very unhappy with you. SMETS1 meters use 3G. Yes, very true, which has been turned off. Exactly. So at some point, actually, there's a detail here which is probably worth saying. My meter is a SMETS1 meter, but it's from a company called Secure. And if you have a look at the terms and conditions of energy suppliers, they'll usually say something like they will support this tariff with a SMETS2 smart meter or SMETS1 from Secure. So hopefully, if you've got a SMETS1 from Secure, most of these automations will work. And Secure is the name of a company. I presume none of this works well if the mobile connection to a local cell is dodgy or intermittent. Absolutely correct. Electricity companies have got no way to monitor that. If you have issues, you can report it, and at some point, your energy supplier will get the DCC, the company that manages the smart meters, out to try and fix it. Is there a ranking list of installing companies for solar and batteries? I'm in Wokingham in Berkshire, and I can give you a personal recommendation of an electrician. Personally, I prefer to go for local companies, because then if there's anything wrong, they can come out at short notice and try and fix things. But, solar cells in particular are a bit like double glazing salesmen, the big national companies who come and do it, and they give you a quote and then you say no and they have to quote and all this sorts of stuff. So choosing them is a bit of a nightmare. But, if you ask that question on the forum, I can certainly share who I used. For those without solar batteries, does the standard variable rate change hourly, or is it average for each day? So 2 tariffs that Octopus supports. They support the tracking tariff, which is fixed each day. And something like 4 p.m. the day before, they set the rate for the following day. So your automations can make use of that. You might, if your tomorrow's tracker rate is high, you might decide to defer your batch cooking until the next day's rate is low. So you can do some automation, but agile rate varies every half an hour. So again, you need automation to really make use of that. And people do this, and you can go onto forums, and people got oodles of rules to make use of their ever-changing agile rules to make best use. Consume electricity when it's cheap and export it when the export's cheap. All the same principles. Agile, it's just going to happen half-hour basis. What wind speeds are roof panels rated for? That was included in my quote. I remember it because it's now a requirement to include it. But your roof panels are going to start having problems when roof tiles start flying off your roof. So if you get 200-mile-an-hour winds, then you've probably got bigger problems than your solar panels, to be honest. Do they need cleaning? There was a discussion on this. I saw on Octopus Hidden Forum, I said, and people use home automation to measure the efficiency of the panels, and by implication, trying to figure out if they need cleaning or not. And the general principle seems to be, no, you actually don't need them cleaning. If you've got chunks of moss growing on them or lichen, yeah, you might have a 0.0001% hit, but it's probably not going to be a big deal. You might want to clean your panels every 5 years or 10 years or something like that. Anecdotal evidence, it's probably not a big deal cleaning them.
Actually, can I break in there, Peter?
Yeah.
I think the biggest problem we've got with panels is pigeon poo.
Oh, right.
But the other thing is that depending on, Peter won't have this problem, but we did, because ours aren't part of the roof surface. They're retrofitted, so there's a gap, and certain kinds of pigeons can get underneath and they nest, and all of a sudden you end up with a flock of 200 pigeons on.
Yeah.
So the most important thing to do is fit bird proofing around the panels.
Yeah.
If they aren't flush mounted to the
Yeah, mine are flush, so I don't have that problem. Interestingly, a guy on our street didn't have the protection, and he had all this nesting problem. He put protection in, but even then, for years afterwards, pigeons hang around his house.
Yeah, it's home. It's the homing instinct. Once they're put there, you're bugging, because they'll just stay there and cover everything.
Yeah. Could a battery be used in UPS mode? Yes, we talked about that, but you have to go into island mode. So it's not really a UPS. It takes a few seconds for an inverter system to disconnect from the grid and then power up your internal circuits in this island mode without grid connection. What time from, say, 100% to 80% for degradation of silicon PV, 10 years? There was a discussion on the local technology group or science group about this. And one of the guys here has had solar panels for over 25 years, and he's not seeing any degradation in practice. He's been graphing them in Excel for the last 25 plus years, is that sort of person. And he's not seen any changes over 25 years. So, maybe some panels are hit by degradation, others aren't, whatever. But it doesn't seem to be a big deal. From cloudy day to bright sunshine, what variation is the power output variable? You can go on the websites actually, and they'll do estimates of how much power you get from your solar panels based on direction, size, inclination, but also the typical weather patterns in your area. And that's actually proven to be pretty accurate in my case. And yeah, during the summer, sunny day, I get over 100% of its rated value. When it's cloudy, maybe, I don't know, 30%, but you still get some solar. I found over winter time, usually the solar was sufficient to power the house at least. And, maybe some excess solar to charge a battery, and very sunny, I would export and make a bit of money. What battery technology? Well, it will be lithium battery, and most manufacturers these days at the moment are using a type of lithium battery.
Ferrophosphate?
Yes, thank you. That has a high thermal runaway voltage. You really don't want to have a fire in your house if there's if you park into your garage and you drive into your solar panel and break your battery and start short circuiting it, you don't really want your battery to burst into flames. LFP batteries, yeah, I think that's what David says. And that has a higher thermal runaway value, so it's pretty impossible. It's going to catch fire and not being able to put out. Even so, best practice is, and I did this, put a smoke alarm above it. That's what I did in my garage. LFP was the answer. So, John, you've got your hand up very patiently. Sorry about that. Can't hear you. Can you unmute?
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, again.
Yeah, when I installed solar about 6 years ago here, the maximum you could send back to the grid, the maximum size inverter was 3.6 kilowatts. You could put more solar panels on, but you couldn't. That was the maximum that could go out. Unfortunately, I thought, well, why would I have more than 3.6 kilowatts of solar panels, which actually wasn't very good logic if I thought about it. But has that changed?
No.
You know, or
I thought it was about 5 kilowatt export, but David's sort of agreeing with the 3.6, I think.
Yeah. So
the thing I was going to ask you, have you considered, when you talked about your carbon footprint, if you are indeed arbitraging electricity with Octopus and selling it, you know, at a higher rate, have you considered that you would set an automation to make a preference for 4:30 to 6:30, 7:30 to sell off your electricity?
Good question.
Much bigger impact on carbon dioxide levels.
Yes. I don't make that distinction right now. I just let the solar panel do its stuff. So if the battery is 100% full and I've got excess solar, I sell it out, regardless of the time of day. However, there are tariff plans from Octopus like the Cozy, which do have peak export rates around about 4 or 5 p.m. And absolutely, if you have that sort of tariff plan from a monetary perspective, you really want to export your solar or your charged battery during that period.
Yeah. Well, hopefully at some point they'll combine Go for import and for export and make me a lot happier. I'm one of those people that thinks even if I arbitrage 400 times a year, the savings would not compare to the cost of the battery. So I've just avoided that completely thus far. Now with battery prices coming down, it's probably a false economy. That by the time I wore a battery out, it'd probably be cheap as chips. But for now, I got very early into home automation with Bosch and Philips, and I've kind of resisted trying to do home assistant because lots of the stuff I have don't really talk well to them. The heat pump really does. You can't run it on an on-off cycle. You need to be dealing directly with flow temperatures and that sort of thing. So that's all done by a separate company in Manchester called Homely, and there's no hookup with them home automation. But I'm hoping it all gets a little easier in the future.
Yeah, it's a good point. What I meant to share as well, this is the part in Home Assistance where you have plugins to do various things, and these are the plugins I've got. So you can see, I've got a solar forecast plugin. I've got one for television for some reason, printing, local access to smart plugs, and so on. I've got My Energy, Octopus, so on and so forth. And you see they've got little icons here. And that gives you the requirements that this plugin has. So the Octopus plugin requires you to have an internet connection. In other words, this plugin has to go out to the internet, talk to the Octopus servers to get any information. Whereas the, what I was going to say, the local Chewy doesn't have that. So in other words, that's all within your home network. Really, you want to get to the point where you do as much as possible of everything you can do on your local network without reaching out to the internet, because reaching out to the internet has a couple of issues. One is, it's not going to work when your internet connection's down. And secondly, you're going to be exposing your data to these systems, whether you like it or not.
Could I just ask you, is there, I'm assuming that Home Assistant is an order of magnitude more reliable than the automations you could set up on Alexa, because they drive me completely bonkers. Half of them just don't work as advertised half the time.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's alternatives to Home Assistant. You mentioned Alexa's, Google. There's other home. I make the conscious decision to, one, stick to open source, because then I can look at the code, and secondly, have something which works with lots of different types of devices. You find that if you install, Apple home automation, and it works really well with Apple devices, but less well with Google devices and so on. And you don't really know what it's doing under the cover. So I made a conscious choice to stick with open source and these plugins, which has some downsides, you can get bugs and such like. David.
Sorry, yeah, I had 2 points. One was on the roof panels, but the other one was on the home automation. I think that the major benefit of Home Assistant is that it allows you to make devices interoperate that wouldn't otherwise. I mean, for the reason you made, but in our case, when I have surplus power from the solar, I want to be able to prioritize between the hot water tank and the car. And I can't because the car charger won't talk to the hot water diverter. So we have to go over to the hot water diverter and push a button so it doesn't start sucking power off the grid. The thing about Home Assistant, it will allow that sort of integration, interoperability to happen independent of the preferences of the people selling the products, which is a very important thing. And in fact, that's the exact example I'll be looking at when I start playing with Home Assistant. The other point was about roof panels. I've seen a couple of questions about how efficient something is and how long they last and how many panels you should have on the roof. The thing is that there are costs around the whole system, and one of the big costs in putting panels on the roof is the scaffolding. So if you just because you might be able to extend the number of panels, it's going to cost you the scaffolding. So you only want to pay that once. You fill your roof with panels, whatever panels are available. That allows you to capture most of the light. So you can extend the amount of day that you can generate power, and you can extend the months of the year in which you can capture power as well. And if you get some degradation in one or two panels, it's covered because you've probably got a 30% surplus over what you're allowed to put out through your inverter, which is very hard. It's very hard to get that increased from the 3.8. That's why all of them do 3.8, because that's allowed. But if you want to go above that, you have to get permission from the DNO. So the DNO is the organization that actually provides power. So for example, in this area, it's Scottish and Southern Electricity, although I actually pay Octopus. So it's the DNO that gives you permission to do all these sort of things. And you think getting the paperwork to just do normal solar panel and output to the grid is difficult. Trying to go above the 3.8, I mean, that takes too long, and it's getting harder. All right, that's me.
It costs a lot.
Thank you.
Sorry, say again.
To go above 3.8 costs a great deal. It's very expensive.
Well, yeah, because most of the inverters are limited to 3.8, so you're paying the extra for the products, but also it's harder to convince the DNO to actually let you do it, because what you're doing is you're eating into connection capacity by the larger solar farms, which have their own, having their problems as well.
Actually, the application process is very expensive, according to my electrician.
Paul, you got a hand up?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, sorry. I was just in the notes section. When presumably, if you're not doing feed into the grid, if you just want to fit solar panels and the battery, either or both, you don't need any planning permission for that. And secondly, when you fit the solar panels, how do they actually attach to the roof in a waterproof way?
Depends on your roof.
Yeah,
like a normal tiled roof with rafters and wood.
Yeah.
It's not thatched or anything like that.
Yeah, you saw my my picture of my roof. I've got panels which are level to the tiles, so there's no tiles underneath the solar panel.
Right.
And the structure to fit solar panels level is very similar to these Velux windows. You know, they have troughs of water flows around the outside and such like. Regardless of exporting in theory, as I understand it, you can't export unless you've got permission to do so.
Yeah.
Even so, I mean, I was exporting before I got all the paperwork through for about 6 months. I was happily exporting, but not getting paid for it.
But do you need any planning to actually put the panels on and fit the battery?
I don't believe so. But yeah, I think you have to be careful not to export anything to the grid. Again, I think David.
Yeah, if you're not exporting though, and you just want to power internally.
So there is a constraint, I think, but I don't think it's planning permission per se. It's more to do with building regs.
Yeah.
So
okay.
So we've got a standard tile pitch roof. And one of the things I did was to get a structural engineer to look at the wooden, it's the diagonal bits. Because we were putting panels on top of normal tiles, so it was additional weight. And his recommendation was to double up the stringers, the diagonal ones, to basically double them up to carry the weight.
Okay, right. And just another one, Peter, on this. I mean, my house is 30 years old. It's passed all the electrical inspections because I only moved in last year. But and of course, the regulations change nearly every couple of years. But normally, would people have to change anything on their internal wiring, or is it just the additional wiring to put this stuff in?
Yeah, you saw the picture of the battery. That's actually located in my garage. That's the choice I've made. And the electrician put an extra circuit breakers in for the battery and so on. So there's wiring specific to the battery. But beyond that, there was no other changes to the house,
Right. And can you mount them outside the batteries as well? Because I don't have a garage. It's been converted. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks.
Oh, I'm concerned that we've way overrun, which is probably a good thing because I think we've had lots of good discussions. Unless there's anything else, I'm going to call today's meeting to a halt. I will upload the recording and I will send up a follow-up message to the email groups so you can see it. And last thing to say, if there's any other further discussions, we've got a forum on U3A Community's website specific for Home Assistant. So if you can use that, then everyone will see everyone else's messages rather than, sending me lots of emails directly. Steve, you got your hand up. Sorry, I didn't see that.
Oh, well, just as a matter of interest, how much is your gas bill in the winter?
Sorry, I didn't really understand the question or comment.
Do you have a gas? You said you have gas central heating. How much is the gas bill in the winter?
So what I personally do with gas is I try to avoid it from a carbon footprint point of view, but I'm currently a bit stuck because I've got a gas boiler. So what I do is I've removed my gas cooking hob, replaced it with induction. So that's one use of gas gone. I heat my hot water during the summer via electricity with off-peak electricity because that's cheaper and greener than gas. And that leaves me with gas central heating during the winter time. I'm on the Octopus tracker for gas, which is, probably around about 2/3 of the regular price. And that's all I've personally done so far. I've still got on my to-do list a way to get rid of gas completely from the house with figuring out the best way to do central heating with electricity.
All right. Oh, yes. Yes. Because I was thinking your 5 kilowatt hour electricity consumption is quite high if you've got a gas boiler in the winter, because I only use 5 kilowatt hour and I have no gas.
Right.
So your insulation needs doing, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got shutters up at night and a carport, which is collects solar heat. So
Excellent.
it cuts down my electricity quite a bit,
Okay, let's call it to an end then. I'll send out the email probably tomorrow with any follow-ups, and hopefully see some further questions on the Home Assistant Forum on UCA E3 Communities. So thanks for attending, and see you next month.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, it's great. Fabulous.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Really excellent, comprehensive. Yeah,
Thank you.
fabulous.